Okay, the Board of Education of Livermore Valley Joint Unified School District is now reconvening to open session. And our first item is the Pledge of Allegiance, and we have Jonathan Andrade here to help us with the Pledge of Allegiance. So please come forward.
Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And then, as usual, we always want you to come by and say hello to the board. So if you would come. Oh, he's going to come by.
Livermore Castle.
Yes.
Yes. Thought that was
What's cowboy like?
It's a cowboy. So
yeah, it is work.
It's close.
Thank you for coming. We appreciate you doing that.
All right.
And so this is a regular meeting of the Board of Education for the Livermore Valley Joint Unified School District. Our primary focus is the education of students of this school district. During this meeting, the members of the public will have the opportunity to share information and voice their ideas and concerns regarding matters within the jurisdiction of this public agency. During the board's discussion of each agenda item, there will be time for you to have the opportunity to speak to that item. If the topic you want to address is not on the agenda, although this is not mandatory, we encourage you to fill out and turn in a tan speaker card, such as this one. Then you will be called to speak on that topic during communications from the public. If you wish to speak on an item which is on the agenda, we encourage you to fill out and turn in a blue speaker card. Again, that's not mandatory to do so, but then again, I will call your names in no particular order to speak to the board for no more than 3 minutes unless otherwise noted. And our meetings are televised on cable channel 28 on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. and Saturdays at 9 a.m. So this is your chance to see yourself on TV, perhaps, but we'll hopefully give most of you on the front row a chance to do that. And do we have any changes to the agenda?
Mr. President, we have no changes this evening.
Yeah, and I should make a comment. At our closed session, Kate Runyon was there, but she was not able to stay. And we have also a number of other of our staff members who are out ill. And so we also excuse them because they're usually here to help support us. And with that, I think we're moving to recognitions.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I'm very pleased to introduce the principal of Livermore High School, and it looks as if he has other administrators with him as well, our vice principals. This is Alberto Solorzano, and he will be doing the honors of a special recognition of some very hardworking and important staff members of Livermore High.
Absolutely. So if I could have the team just kind of approach and maybe do a half circle behind me. Thank you. All right. Thank you, President Dunlap and members of the board. Thank you for allowing us time this month to recognize staff members at Livermore High School. It always is a great time when you can really sit back and think about the folks who are really making an impact at one school site. And so when you think about people who are directing traffic in the morning, when you think about people who are probably chasing dogs that enter on a campus off your school side, if you think about the first responders to an incident happening out in the play yard or the quad, when you think about monitoring the ingress and egress of students onto your campus, our folks do more than that. One of the things that have impressed me over the last year and a half is that they're the first responders to many different situations that have occurred on our campus. Probably 3 major incidences that have occurred on our campus. 2 of them have been a lockdown, and then one of them which occurred at the swimming pool, an incident where we had a near drowning. The campus supervisors were the first responders to many of these incidences and have responded with the utmost professionalism, the utmost in terms of courtesy when dealing with the public, in terms of dealing with diffusing situations where anxieties have elevated. The campus supervisors are responsible for diffusing such situations so things don't become out of control. I've witnessed them deal with the issues of conflict on our campus. They've created hundreds, maybe even close to thousands of different connections. They know a lot of kids. They know our kids. Another thing that impresses me is that they can identify a student who doesn't belong on Livermore's campus. And it's because I believe that the Cowboys have a certain swagger, and so they carry themselves a different way, and so they're able to quickly identify non-students. And so keeping our school very safe and orderly is due in large part because of our campus supervisors. They're not only just working during the school hours, but they put in hours after coaching our teams, volunteering times to work with different clubs and organizations, being asked to even supervise and chaperone our Disneyland trips or other field trips. So they do much more than just kind of keep the peace. And so I'm very happy to recognize our campus supervisors, and I'll individually announce their names. Dan McCaffrey, also a football coach. Roger Oji, also a football coach. The real Katy Perry. Pam Johnson. Bill Snyder. And Christine Ness. And one is absent tonight because he is also volunteering his time playing against the police officers, where it's the Cowboys versus the police officers. There's a fundraising event at our school, in which I know many of us are probably going to race back over there to go support our program. And so John Flores is also a campus supervisor at our campus. So with that, thank you very much for allowing us this time. Campus supervisors, you continue to impress me. Thank you for a job well done.
This is the.
Yeah.
Good to see you. Good to see you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for all your smiles. Thanks.
For our next recognition, we all know that we couldn't do the many wonderful things that we accomplish on behalf of our students and schools if we didn't have such tremendous community support. And a key partner in that support is the Rotarian Foundation. So with that, I'll ask Mrs. Amy Robbins, our Director of Curriculum and Special Projects, to come forward. They have a special presentation tonight, and we want to use this as an opportunity to recognize the Rotarian Foundation of Livermore.
Good evening, President Dunlop, members of the board, Superintendent Bowers. Tonight we would like to recognize, as our superintendent said, our Rotarian Foundation of Livermore, and I would like to ask their president, Fred Quarterman, to come forward. As mentioned, our Rotarian Foundation is one of our special partners and who have done a lot to go above and beyond to fund various opportunities within our school district. And so they're here this evening to talk a little bit about some of the fundraising they've been doing, one of which was a large fundraising opportunity that was held last year for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics to support our programs. So here is Fred Quarterman, the president.
Does this come out? It's even better. I'd like to have the foundation board please come forth, and I don't like sitting in front of them because we're a team. First of all, hello. Yeah, it's nice to be back in front of the board after 35 years in the school district. It doesn't really change. You still get nervous, but it's all good. The Rotarian Foundation of Livermore, I know she had goals, and I'm going to give our goals to you. Our mission statement actually says, the Rotarian Foundation of Livermore will provide funds or like support to create opportunities for young people, promote community service, and improve the quality of life for the benefit of all in the Livermore Valley. Now, the foundation was founded in 1987, and over the years we have given to the community and to the schools over $800,000. Yeah, thank you. And it's because of folks you see with me, their dedication and their commitment to the community that makes this work. So I'd like to introduce to my left, Mr. Irv Stowers. And person was vital for the STEM and the whole organization to get that money to the school district. This was last year's foundation president, Mr. Jim Caldwell. We have Marty Plone. We have our one of the original founders, but he didn't want me to say that, but it's okay. Back in 1987, Mr. Plone was one of the original founders of the foundation. So if you want history, this is your man. And we have Gretchen Rutherford, we have Graham Scott, and we have our president-elect, Mr. Chuck Hartwig. Now, tonight is kind of a special moment because we are going to present a check to you tonight in the amount of $20,000 for STEM education, for elementary STEM education, and the board voted for that to happen. So thank you very much, board. So Kelly, I give this to you.
Our chief business official is absent today, so Cindy wants to take it. She's in charge of STEM. So.
I really should recognize some other people that really made this work, and Cindy Alba was one, and Amy Robin was another, and Superintendent Bowers, you guys are just really wonderfully supportive, and thank you so much for all of your efforts to make this happen. So, Ms. Alba, photo opportunity, you ready? Maybe. Put it right there. All right, Ms. Alba, we're going to make this good now. All right, everybody's going to smile. Are we all good? Good. Oh, there you go. Have to hold your hand a little longer. And that's our basic. We'll walk around and shake our hand.
Of course, of course.
Want to lead the way? Sure. Short and sweet to the point.
Good to see you.
Nice. Thanks for getting Don't worry.
Hi, Marty. Long time.
Thank you for the help.
Good to see you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome and thank you. So you're going to run the show next year? Oh, great.
Yes. Hello, Ann.
Thank
Good to
you.
see you.
Pleasure. Good for you. Okay, so we'll move on to the student board member reports. And since they're having such an exciting time at Livermore, we'll let you go first. We have Natalie Asimi here substituting from Livermore. So we'll let you go first. So in case you need to run out and catch up with your colleagues from Livermore, you can do so.
Good evening, Superintendent Bowers, President Dunlap, and fellow board trustees. Tonight I will be substituting for Sarah Dreher. So for clubs at Livermore High School, FCA had Stephen Dusky, a fellow player for the Raiders, and he came in today and he spoke to the students about his experiences, and a lot of students were really inspired, and there was a huge crowd that actually attended that. Now for sports, both girls and boys water polo made it to NCS, and the girls will have their first NCS game on November 7th. Varsity girls and boys water polo beat Granada last week. The girls had 8-4 and the boys had 23-3. Also, girls tennis plays San Ramon tonight. Boys football will be playing Granada this week, and they will be playing this Wednesday, Thursday, and boys varsity will also be going to the playoffs next weekend. And girls tennis and girls volleyball had their senior night tonight. Also tonight, the girls basketball team will have their Cops vs. Cowboys annual fundraiser. Now on to school activities. So float night was fantastic, and it went very smoothly. For our judges, we had our previous principal, Mr. Avila, and we also had Faith from KKIQ, Mrs. Walker, a previous guidance counselor, and Superintendent Bowers. Also, the results for float night, the seniors were in first place, juniors were in second, and sophomores in third, as freshmen took last. There was also a bonfire that night, and it was bigger than ever. There was a huge crowd, and the varsity football coach pumped up the crowd. And although we lost the game that night, the following day, the boys did a great job, and there was a lot of school spirit, and the student body was tremendous.
And there were also fire safety personnel close to the bonfire, just so folks know.
Yes. So for homecoming royalty, she was crowned as Kendra. She was crowned as queen, and that was announced on Friday night at the homecoming game. And Keegan was announced as king at the dance. The homecoming dance was fantastic and went very smoothly. Last week we had a game against Cal High, and at that night we had the 20th anniversary of Livermore High School's football alumni, and they won E-ball 20 years ago. And they were recognized at the game during halftime. The senior class turned in their votes for senior favorites. Operation Needle Drop tryouts just ended last week. The Livermore versus Granada game is this week, and t-shirts are going to be sold tomorrow. The game will be held at Livermore High School, and this year we'll be having a veteran celebration, and there will be airplanes on the campus. Also, we have a Spirit Week this week, and our days for Monday is Despicable Me Day. Today was Duck Dynasty Day. Wednesday is America Day, and Thursday is Green and Gold Day. Thank you for now. That is what is happening at Livermore High School. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. And there will be airport safety personnel there as well, just so you guys know.
Yes.
Livermore has a lot of fun activity ideas, and our liability folks always make sure that everything's in place.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Schultz. Ms. Schultz, please.
Good evening, President Dunlap, Superintendent Bowers, and members of the board. We're now in our 10th week of school at Granada and rapidly approaching the end of trimester 1, so that means finals in 2 weeks. In the world of sports, our girls water polo is the 5th seat at NCS, and they'll be competing, I think, next weekend. Football beat Amador Valley last Friday, and we made it to the playoffs, so we're really excited about that and hoping to get to support our boys through the playoffs. Girls cross country are first in the league, and the boys are second, entering North Coast sectional finals. So we're really excited about that. And the girls are undefeated with a record of 7-0. Taylor Robles qualified for the NorCal Championships for golf, so we're really proud of her, and we're excited to see how far she goes. And our winter sports tryouts will be beginning on Monday. In the world of academics, our EOS survey has been completed finally. So the EOS survey was for equal opportunity schools, and it was to give us an idea of which students had enough knowledge and access to AP courses, and those who didn't, we would be able to try to help them into becoming aware of the courses they're available to take and the teachers who can help them succeed in those courses. So it's just been completed, and we're looking forward to getting the results regarding the students' readiness for AP courses and also whether or not they were where they should be taking them. So we're excited to see that. Last week, our school raised enough money to send Delaney Newton and her family to Disney when she finishes her cancer treatment through Disney Dollars for Delaney, and we raised close to over $3,000, so we're really excited about that, and we're just hoping to help her through her journey and help her family along the way. We're also gathering supplies and goodies to make gift baskets to bring to her in the hospital, so we're hoping to support a fellow Livermore community member and family. So our school is also having a Spirit Day or Spirit Week this week, and yesterday we had our first day of the Spirit Week, which was Zombie Apocalypse Day, so a bunch of the Walking Dead around campus. It was a lot of fun. And today we had our Disney Day, so it was exciting to see everything everyone came up with. And tomorrow will be senior citizens versus babies. So upperclassmen, so juniors and seniors, will be dressed as senior citizens, and the freshmen and sophomores will be dressed as babies. So I'm excited to see how those costumes turn out. And then Thursday, of course, will be our Black and Gold Day as we prepare for our rivalry game against Livermore, which will be held at Livermore. So we're really excited to support our team out there and bring our bullpen to Livermore Stadium. So we're really excited about that. Last week, we held a tailgate in Alumni Square where we served Wingstop, and we got students excited for the game that was against Amador. So we had a face paint stand, and we had a booth with where you could buy Spirit wear before entering the game in case you forgot to wear your black and gold. So we had a lot of fun at that, and it was a great success, and so we had a really good turnout. And we're also hosting a No Shave November as part of our campaign for Granada Fights, which is our campaign to raise money for cancer research. So we're really excited about that, and that began November 1st, so last Friday. So students picked up their packets to raise money through donations, and we're going to be seeing a lot of interesting outcomes from that, but we're excited to see how much money is raised for our Granada Fights cause. So we're also really excited for our 4-day weekend that's upcoming, so we're hoping that students will use that time to prepare for finals and recover from the long and tiring cheering at the Livermore Granada football game. And we're also going to have our Fall Sports Rally Thursday, and there are going to be a lot of surprises in store. So we're excited for the rest of this week and the upcoming events. That's all that's going on now. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. And now it's time for our employee associations. So Ms. Field, if you'd like to come up.
Good evening, President Dunlap, Superintendent Bowers, members of the board. It is November, the weather's starting to change, and things are happening. We have a lot of new things that the association has been learning and growing and bringing back to our members. At State Council this couple weekends ago, there was quite a presentation about restorative justice. And I've already brought that back to share with both our website and members of our district. And one of the speakers was Gordon Jackson, the Assistant Superintendent of the Coordinated Student Support in Adult Education Division within the CDE. And he did a presentation on suspension and expulsion. And really informative PowerPoint. And there was a panel of speakers dealing with restorative justice. And so one of the schools, I believe, is one that we will be checking out to see about their practice of using peer court and restorative justice in their school system. I believe it's in Reed Union School District over in Tiburon, but I will have to check it out again. There were panelists from San Francisco's Unified, from San Bernardino, from Marin, and it was a really informative and powerful presentation. We also are checking into Checkers, which is a not-for-profit organization that provides free health benefit, both labor and management training to help associations and management work together to improve the benefit experience, especially now in the land of so many unknowns and high cost. the part that I'm really interested in is they have a second opinion program where they provide a free desk review to help determine whether or not there are options out there that'll help save your employees money. And it is a fee for service. So they will check it out, find to see if there's anything out there that might be better than what you currently have. And so I've done some outreach with our local associations, and Dublin is very interested in joining us. I've heard back from their presidents and also from their HR, their superintendent of HR. And so they provide the trainings if you have more than one district that is willing to join, and they are free if you have multiple districts, and they do the free desk review as a service. So that's something that we are looking into. So that's it.
Thank you very much. So now is time for communications from the public, and this is the time for the public to comment either in writing or verbally on any item that is not on the agenda. The board may listen to the comment and ask the staff clarifying questions, but they will neither discuss nor take action at this meeting on topics that are not on the agenda in accordance with the Brown Act. If you would like to address a topic that is not on this evening's agenda, now is the time to do so. We ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes so that each speaker will have time. Thank you. And I have one card, which is Mr. Alan Heckman, so if you would like to come up, please.
Good evening. Thank you for welcoming me up here, the board, Mr. Van Schack. My name is Alan Heckman. I'm a Livermore resident and homeowner. My kids, actually, some of you know, go to the Livermore's public charter schools. I happen to notice that you guys are starting to look at another bond. I'm assuming you're going to look to replace the one expiring in June of 2015. I think it's great. And I think it'd be great for also to get the charter families to get on board as soon as possible, be part of the effort to obtain additional funding that will benefit all of our public schools, district as well as charter. District charter partnerships have proven very successful. I've seen it in San Diego, Proposition Z, as well as in Sacramento. People are kind of concerned about taxes because they can cause property values decline, but from what my experience, and I found that younger couples actually shopping for homes in Livermore are often told by realtors about our charter schools, and they really protect our property values. Let's see. And as you know, we have very kind of a large and active constituency. And our charter families are very enthusiastic about the education of our children. We are one of the greatest proponents of education here in Livermore. We're willing to do whatever it takes to ensure success. And hopefully we look forward to working with you. And I'd like to thank you for your time.
Good, thank you very much. Now it's time for written correspondence. Do we have any written correspondence?
Yes, Mr. President, we have a letter from the Alameda County Superintendent of Schools to Mrs. Bowers, to you, the President of the Board, and to Greg Elliott, Principal at Junction Avenue K-8 School. The staff from a team from the Alameda County office is charged with visiting schools who are ranked in deciles 1 to 3 on the API to determine if there are sufficient standards aligned instructional materials in specified areas. Sufficient means that each pupil, including English learners, has standards aligned materials to use in class and to take home. The team visited in September, and the superintendent is writing to us to let us know that the Junction Avenue School was found to be compliant with the Education Code, which is casually known as the Williams Settlement legislation. She also wants to extend her appreciation for the cooperation from the site and district personnel. That's always good to hear. From the part, we've got staff who are helpful in that situation. I have another letter from Devin Franklin, Her child is a 6th grader at middle school, and in her the student's core class, an exemplary student essay was heard, and she read the essay. The essay was written about her son, and he soon became the butt of campus jokes and humor. And the parent is concerned that what happened to her student not happen to any other student.
And this has been a couple of weeks ago, if I remember correctly.
Something like
so
that.
do we have any clarification on this, Superintendent?
Yes, so thank you. There was follow-up at the site level and then obviously through the district. And the teacher has met with the parent. The administration was involved. There were apologies exchanged, and the parent feels very satisfied with the resolution and understands the intent was to showcase one student, not at the expense of another sibling. And so things are moving along, and we feel that it's resolved. And I think everyone learned, we're all in school learning lessons. I think everyone learned a lesson by that.
Good, thank you. And we're on to the next item in the agenda, which is our information discussion items. We'll start with item A.
So thank you, Mr. President. We do have some visitors here from Traumatola, and Mr. Chris Van Schack has been working with them, our assistant superintendent, so he'll do the honors of the introduction. But I wanted to preface that with the fact that tonight is election night, and even though in Livermore we don't have anything on the agenda, they have a few items that are on different agendas in neighboring cities and throughout the area. And so we're going to try to keep them moving along, and if they need to leave or take a phone call, it's because they're doing service to others who are in a position that we hope to be in one day.
Thank you, Ms. Bowers. It is my honor to welcome forward Larry Traumatola and Teresa Geringer from Traumatola Advisors. They've been working with and around the district for a number of years, and they've recently come aboard to share their expertise with us as we gather information about a potential facility bond. So they're here this evening to share some information with us about themselves and about the process as we move forward. So thank you for being here.
Great. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to participate in school board meetings. You do a lot of great work, and it's really it is really an honor to be here. What we wanted to do tonight was just do a very quick summary of the steps that you may choose to take as you look forward to a bond measure. And I might say that one of the things that we need to keep in mind as you prepare for a potential bond measure is also that within a short amount of time, you will also have a need to probably renew your parcel tax. And so we always want to keep these things in mind. And as you know, there's differing thresholds that you have to have from the community to pass them. And it's just always a consideration. And when we get more into the work of this, we'll have other conversations. We've been doing this work for more years than I actually want to admit now. I think we passed the first parcel tax in the state, and over the years we've passed almost $40 billion of bonds and parcel taxes for school districts in the state, and had the great honor of working with you in the past. The fundamentals today are really the same as they were 20 or 30 years ago on how you pass a bond measure. And I try to describe them to every group that we work with, whether it be a school board or teachers or parents or even students, that what the fundamentals are to pass a tax measure. And whether you are a year or two away from an election or the night of election night, voters will look at one thing most importantly, and that is, what is it that you want to do with the money? And so the plan, this is more than just politics. It's really the plan of what you want to do with the money. And so we take great care in working with you and trying to both understand and help guide you in terms of what is a plan that this community will support. What is the mix of projects? What's the time frame? All of that. And so the more specific, obviously, that we can be in articulating that plan, the greater the chance is that voters will support that. So people say, what's the best thing to be able to pass a tax measure? And I said, focus on the plan, what you're going to do with the money. The second thing is to understand from the very beginning that most of the people that vote in your community do not have children in school. Now, while a good portion of your population will, the people that vote on these measures are generally older and don't have children in schools. So the plan has got to make sense, not just to your educators and not just to your parents, but to the community as a whole. This is clearly a community investment in the quality of schools. So the plan needs to make sense. I'll just give you an example. We're helping a hospital district in Marin. I looked at the vote. 51% of the people that have voted so far are over 65 in that election. Now, we'll look at various election scenarios, but it's really important for people who are creating the plan to really understand who's likely to participate in the election. And so the plan has got to make sense to them. The third piece that's got to be in place is you really have to have the resources to be able to communicate the plan that you develop to the people that are likely to vote. All these things need to be in balance. And of the resources that you have available to you, the most important is time. The most important is time. And in our earlier discussions, we have encouraged the district to look as though June is a possibility, knowing that it might not be, but because we're all human, and if we think this is a year away, there's procrastination. There's other kind of things to be done. And so while you never lose your option, you never lose control of when you want to place this on the ballot, we always think you need to press a little bit and try to keep moving. But time is an important resource, and time is easily lost in doing these elections. The second most important resource is people. And as you know, having done tax elections here, your volunteer base, be it parents or students, staff members and others, are absolutely critical. These elections, when you need a supermajority, whether it's 2/3 when we're looking at a parcel tax or 55% on a Prop 39 GO bond, it's the conversations from one neighbor to another, from a parent to a non-parent, from a younger person to an older person. The conversations that happen in coffee shops, that happen at doorsteps, becomes critically important. So there has to be investment in terms of people understanding what this is about and then inspiring them to participate and to work. So people are very important. I have believed over my career that you can't pass these measures purely through mail or PR. It's really inspiring the community to do that, and you have done that in the past. And the third resource, while you all as a board don't have any major responsibilities in this, there has to be campaign dollars that are raised separately from school resources to be able to manage a campaign. So all of those things have to be in place, and I believe that we need, as I mentioned earlier, need to always think that our goal is not simple passage at 55%, but the 2/3 passage at 2/3. Because of we would be hard pressed to pass a bond at 55%, although we'd be happy about that, and then a year from now needing to get 2/3. So I'm always keeping that in mind. And I can answer your questions as we get through. There are various steps that have to be in place to be able to pass these. I mentioned the first one, a school-by-school site analysis, what the needs are. I don't think you have to have something for every school, although lots of districts do that. It has to make sense for your school district of what you're trying to do. There are issues, obviously, of equity that we need to deal with. We need to communicate whatever plan that you are thinking about to not only parents, but also to the non-parents in the community. We always use voter demographic analysis just to guide our work. At some point, you may choose, and we always like to recommend it, a public opinion poll to see if we are on the right track. Is there tax sensitivity? Are there other issues in the community that maybe we're not aware of that we need to think about? And also that we need to make sure that there's voter engagement, meaning a separate committee is established to be able to run the campaign. You're taking the steps to finalize your bond finance team. The team that you've selected is a good team. It's also your bond, not your finance, but your construction team. It's a quality team that I feel proud to be a part of. We're going to, at some point in time, need to finalize the amount of the bond, the tax rate, and the projects and the ballot language. All of these things are variables that can affect the results. There is no magical number. I used to, and I don't think you back into this. I think you poll really after you know what you want to do and then determine whether you can do that or not. Board action, if you're looking for a November election, board action would have to be the first week of August. If it's a June election, we're looking at the first week of March. So there's some significant time frames. We put in here just for your, just to take a look at the differences in both who your registered voters are and who the people that participate in elections are. Each election has its own unique composition. And if you are putting this on in a off-year election, it's one electorate. If you're putting it on in a general election where there's other things on the ballot, it's another. We also need to look at what's the competition, meaning what other measures might you be competing with, or if it's not competing, what other tax measures may be on the ballot. And I believe in June and November, Alameda County will have tax measures on. It looks like in June, the renewal of Measure A, which is a half-cent sales tax, okay? It will not be an increase, but it'll be the same amount. Historically, this community has been less than enthusiastic about that, and my guess would be that would be the same. It may pass countywide, but it won't do as well, let's say, in Livermore as it might in Berkeley. Okay, so that's June. In November, it looks like there will be a renewal of the transportation tax, which is also an extension of the existing half-cent sales tax, and an increase by half-cent. As you probably all remember, that failed by basically a handful of votes last November, and they're going to redo it again. And we have no control over either one of those. It's just, it is what it is. On that measure as well, that measure did not do extremely well in this area. So it's a likely scenario that people are going to vote, hopefully, yes on this measure, and they may not support the other measures. That's a scenario that could be in place either in June or November. If you look at the voter data, there are 50,290 registered voters in this school district. About 40% to 60% actually vote in 2014 elections. About 40% in June and 60% in November. And the reason it's different is just that you have a gubernatorial election in November and not much interest in June. But that's a factor. In terms of who turns out, it's a little bit, people that vote in June are a little bit older, as I said earlier, and it's a little bit higher in terms of people that vote by mail, which is another factor. 6 to 7 out of 10 voters now in your community are voting by mail. They may not vote early, they may bring their ballots into the polling place, but they are choosing to vote by mail, so communications have to be earlier. So, I should probably stop there and answer any questions that you have.
Questions from the board? Mrs.
You
White?
want to start or no?
No, go ahead.
When we passed Measure L, which was the bond, it was a combined effort from the city, the schools, and the park department. And as my understanding was that there needed to be special legislation to make it possible. And I've not heard enough facts to know if the city and the parks are interested in a repeat performance. But we did pass it by 82%. But it was a March election. And it was a very quiet campaign, predominantly phone banking. Are there possibilities to do that kind of things?
In one of our
Inadvisable.
Well, it's what drove that were the projects that you wanted to do. And I think that, again, it goes back to the plan. What is it that you want to do here? What are the projects? Are they purely school projects, or are they broader community projects? Those things really, those things need to be looked at. In our earlier meetings, there were representatives of the city and the parks, and we had very cordial, very candid conversations. It'll come back to the plan. What is it that we want to do? If we're talking about just school properties, just school facilities, then really there's not a place for the parks and not a place for the city. If there's joint use facilities, perhaps, and I think that's something that we may have to follow.
I think that the other bond was 3 pieces. There was $110 million for the schools, $20 million for the library, which is a community use. It's not joint use, and $20 million for the parks to build a recreation center, which is also community use. So I don't know if they have other obvious community activities that they need facilities for to support or not. But
yeah, with the parks, it has to do probably with more like fields and stuff. And so I think one of the things we need to do as we get into this is have continuing discussions with them to see whether this is a possibility or not, without raising people's hopes and expectations that this could be a thing. That's a delicate balance that we have to follow.
How will we find out if the legislation that was passed to support our 3-agency effort was a one-off deal for that occasion, or whether it's a enduring legislation which would support any community's efforts?
I believe it was one-off, but I think we can find out
from
our legal advisors on that, and that's something I've made a note on that we'll.
Because it was like 1998, and our assembly people and senator picked up that ball and ran real fast.
Just as an aside, unfortunately, our the laws governing tax elections don't give a lot of flexibility, to be honest. And I think what you did back then was something that voters would like to see more of. They like to see governmental agencies working together, and rather than having, and it used to be in some ways that communities could really time in terms of elections so that the public could get a sense of what was happening. Now, because there's so many different agencies that need resources, you feel like you're competing against others. So we're going to check that out, and I think that's something that we need to resolve soon. Again, because I think it's something that we don't want to create a high expectation if it's not possible to be done. But I think what you did back then was brilliant.
Well, and I voted for it.
Most people did, yeah.
One other topic has to do with the activity that the school district's going to have this spring related to the local control accountability plan. And it would seem to me that would not only both take a lot of energy and time from the district, which might otherwise be expended in the efforts of a parcel tax or a bond, but it would also be something that we would heighten awareness of the schools and our needs. I can't remember if facilities was one of the 8 things that we need to deal with, but it might be helpful to coordinate the activities for the LCAP as we talk about create the plan for the facility.
It's obviously, because you've had a lot of experience in doing this. You don't enter these things lightly. It affects it affects everybody in the district. And so you don't just cavalierly put these on the ballot and hope they're going to do well. And I think one of the things that we want to do is to recommend the best time for that. And again, this district is a little unique for us only because of this pending parcel tax that's coming up so quickly afterwards. And I just, I don't want to lose sight of that. And I want to be able to take steps so that the chances of passing both of these are the greatest. I don't want to be thrilled about passing a bond measure and then lose a parcel tax later on. And so we may want to poll on both issues. We may need to involve the parents a little bit on both. I'm not saying we would do them at the same time, but we need to keep those things in mind.
And you might not be aware, but I believe that the mayor and the city council members will be elected at that same time.
I am aware of that.
Okay.
I am aware of that.
So we'll have.
The other thing, you know, the one thing I should say, all the time, without exception, every time I talk to a school district and there are school board elections at the same time as a bond election, people get a little nervous. And it's natural. My belief is we would never even recommend you putting this on the ballot unless we had a high degree of support in this community. And so it's not something that a school board member or somebody running for school board should shy away from, because the vast majority of the people in the community will want to have this. It's a little counterintuitive, but it's that way. It's that way. We will never recommend you putting something on the ballot if we don't feel like there is broad community support for this.
Mr. Hogan, you okay?
One of the things that you mentioned the parcel tax and then the two Alameda County sales tax that are going to come up for vote, but also considerations too for the January 1st 3% increase in the federal income tax, and then the wild card to me is going to be the health care cost. So I think those are other factors, and in determining whether we want to go early or late. Sounds like there's going to be a lot more taxing towards the late, plus other pressures in that same voting stream. So it'll be interesting to see where this is going to go. So.
You know, there are challenges without question. You know, I think there's a pecking order though of taxes, and while you may feel as a school district you're always at the tail end, in terms of pecking order, people, and this, having done this all around the state, in every community of this state, I have never found a community that has been really anti-school. And even if you look at the most conservative voters, they're not anti-tax, despite lots of talk that they are. They just don't want their tax money to go to somebody else. They're not necessarily against paying taxes if you can say that your tax dollars are going to be spent in your community. And that's put school districts' needs a bit higher on the food chain than other people. And clearly, you go into this with a great deal of respect and concern with people's family budgets on how to do that. It's our obligation as a team to figure out the best plan for this community long term, and to do it in a way that we're not putting an undue burden on people. And I take that responsibility really seriously. This is not trying to pull a fast one over the voters and just get something passed. The decisions we make collectively have an impact in this community for many years. Tax burden is one of those things that we need to look at. So we'll look at all those things. And I wish I could say there's going to be no other taxes on the ballot, but there will be. I would love to say that. I can't, honestly. No.
I'm just
Mr. McGoffin?
I've been associated with school governance and teacher for 40 years, and still going with it, still looking at the future for education, and it's a greater future now than there ever has been. Is that we need to find out what the parents want. They're going to tell you there's a good cause, go for it. But it's going to be informational that you're going to have to get out to the parents as to what you're going to do with the money that you're going to get.
Mhm.
So do the job that you're supposed to do. We'll do ours, and we'll support.
Great, thank you.
One minor question. Is there any advantage to the duration of the bond, shorter versus long?
I usually get that question on parcel taxes.
Mm-hmm.
Here's my feeling on that generally. When Proposition 39 passed, I believed, having done probably more tax elections in the state of California for school districts, that school districts would probably go for smaller bonds and shorter periods of time. And our state would become like other states in the country where they need to do a new school or they need to do renovations. You pass a bond, you may do one 2-3 years later or whatever, and just keep it up. But because in California we were so far behind in terms of school facilities, most school districts have done mega bonds, okay? Large bonds. And to do the mega bonds, you have to have a longer pay period, okay? So the longer the pay period, it's just like the longer your mortgage, the more you pay. There is a balance in that. We have to find the right spot. I believe that people that vote for this have a right to see the improvements in the lifetime of their child's education. And that we can't overly burden other generations to be able to pay for that. And so there is a balance. On the whole, if it's shorter, I think it's better. But it's not always possible. But I think school districts have gotten into the trouble of two things. Number one, going for longer bonds for a longer payout period to artificially drop the tax rate to something that they could sell to voters, which I think was a mistake. I believe it was a mistake when they were doing it, and I spoke out against it. I spoke out in Sacramento against it. The other thing is to rely upon artificial growth assessments. We have a pretty good, now, growth assessments are great if you reach them. Growth assessments are terrible if you don't, because it puts more of a burden on those that have their homes and not the people that are moving in the district. And I think here in Livermore, we can be fairly accurate of what that is, and I don't think we should take risks. And I, to be honest with you, I think I am within the tax industry. I'm one of the few people that have spoken out against this because everybody benefits by bigger bonds. The financial advisors, the attorneys, all of that. And I think the clients that I work with, I want to try to make the most conservative and the best decisions for the people that are in the system now and the ones that are coming. And it's difficult, but we have to have candid conversations among us all. And we have to make quality decisions. That's our responsibility. And it's not about how big can our fees be in terms of percent of the bond. It just can't be that way. We make bad decisions, and people all over the state are making bad decisions, and the people that are making bad decisions are affecting the people that are making good decisions. That's the way it is. Off of my soapbox, I'm sorry.
Other questions? Anyone in the audience want to comment on this? If not, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming and being straightforward with us on the issues.
Now closed, so
I was sort of getting, yep, what's done is done. I was getting goosebumps.
It's great to see you all. Thank you very much.
Well, we'll move on to item B.
Yeah, okay. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any, really, based on that, are there pressing questions, more requests for information, or any requests for an additional study session in the near future, or do you want to kind of mull over what you've heard? I just want to make sure that we have enough direction so that we keep going towards some timeline that even hasn't been determined. But you kind of know where we are now, where we're starting to do some needs assessments, and I just want to make sure that we don't stay stagnant.
Are they coming back with a suggestion or report or something that we can chew on at some point, or are they waiting for us?
What we placed in the in your packet, there's 2 timelines that could be options, and I think he alluded a little bit to if we were to go toward a June one, or if we were to go toward the November one. There's a difference in the timelines. Basically, the activities are the same, but one is more accelerated and compressed. And so I think regardless, if you just give us, this isn't an action item, if you give us direction to continue the exploration of needs and probably at intergovernmental based on Trustees White question, we may see if other agencies are positioned and have any interest in joining us. He's going to do some of his research about if that's even feasible. But I guess I just want to have at least tacit direction from the board, even if it's not a formal vote, of can we continue the exploration, go on this process, and looking at the first portion of the timeline that's proposed.
I think it's important that we go and proceed with this. We've got so many facility issues now and in the future that we really do need to attend to them. Safety of our students and the welfare of them, I think it's important. I think we need to really explore it.
Any other comments?
I'm really hard pressed to see if we can do everything we need to do before March.
I think many of us are too, and so that's why
this is not easy. This is board members out there talking to the community, making remarks every opportunity you get, walking precincts, going to meetings, speaking to people who may have a check to write, responding to the public. Doing that and watching over the LCAP preparation seems to me a big plateful of tasks. If you can think that we can do them both, we could probably grit our teeth and bear it, but it does seem like a heavy load.
So the timeline, I'm just looking back to the packet, regardless of if we were to go in June or November, and again, all of that's contingent. If there was any polling on either and it indicated that wasn't going to be successful, their advice is then you don't try it. Regardless of that, if you look to your packet, the items that remain the same are the needs assessment and planning, which we're beginning to do the site-by-site needs analysis, the draft facility master plan, and there's going to be a financial analysis with K&N. They're going to start looking at the possibilities of what types of bond amounts would be available if it were solo or joint. And then we would finalize a bond planning team. We have a facilities team that's meeting. Then we would keep the board updated with any of the answers to your questions. And then they would start to come up with a work plan, and the community out. Trematola has said that in these months of November, December, they would come up with a detailed project work plan and a community outreach plan. And they could begin to look for the public opinion research, so by December. And that's the same. I think the biggest difference is if they would wait on the poll, the poll comes later if we have more time.
This idea just popped into my head. If they did a poll earlier and found out that the community was overwhelmingly behind us, we still would do a plan and we still would carry on everything, but we wouldn't have to struggle for support. If 85% of the polls said that we want to build it, then we wouldn't the tension and the activities of the election would be somewhat less. I hesitate to say how much less, but.
So they've talked about 2 different kinds of polls. So the first poll is more of just the litmus test of is this even in the ballpark? And then there could be a more detailed one about, if this, and then if there's a parcel tax and or some of the segments. So what I'm hearing from Trustee White is that we could still try for the accelerated timeline.
I'm thinking that the accelerated timeline would give us a better chance because we're not going to compete with those other taxes in November. I don't want to be on the ballot with all the other taxes because then you start getting the mindset, or some get the mindset of voting all taxes down. And then it will be a lot of work, but I'm thinking, when is the poll going to happen? The preliminary litmus test, I was thinking right mid-January or into January, because a lot of information will start coming out for the taxes for the year. And that would give us more an indication of the success of a near the June or the going to the November. It's really hard. It's really hard to predict. I mean, because the economy is still somewhat unstable. It's hard to predict what people are going to do. Housing is up in this area, so I don't know if we're immune to it. But I also, looking at his statistics, we're aging in this community, and as you get older, you're starting looking out for your monies for retirement things, and you don't want all those pressures of taxes. I mean, those are factors.
But that's why we polled to find that.
Yeah, exactly, and
so you don't have to predict. That's the good thing.
I think part of the process, that we're engaging in right now is the determination of the site needs. And he talked about the development of a plan. So site by site, we're determining what are the needs to bring our facilities into line with what our goals are. Once the needs have been developed and we have somebody come in and do some general cost estimation, now you can say, okay, here's what it looks like. And that becomes part of the polling process, where Tramotola would go forward and say, here are the types of projects, Livermore community, do you support these projects? And they give their feedback. And I think Trustee White hit the nail on the head. If the support in the community is overwhelmingly in favor of safety, upgrading technology, energy efficiency, things like that, then I think that gives us some direction. So I think a mid-January poll, I think, might provide us the information we need to determine whether or not June or November is most appropriate.
If you say new gym at Livermore High, I think you become an instant
Right.
hero.
Yeah. Yeah, so there are a number of items, I think, and again, I think we're very proud of our facilities, but we also recognize that, as he mentioned, that California as a whole has fallen far behind. And we've got some catching up to do in terms of the things that we provide for our students. So there's plenty of need there, that's for sure.
I think the plus for us is we've always been very candid about our needs and what we're trying to fix. I think we have the community's ear on those kind of issues. So I think that's a big deal for us to push this.
I think it comes down to the fact that we all realize that timing is everything, and if we don't get stuff together, then we lose some of the ability to have the flexibility to go either earlier or late. So clearly we need thoughts in the next couple of months about what are the key issues we would want to resolve in buildings, and then the issue is how much does that cost and how long it's going to take us, and we've got to cover basically the upgrades for the buildings that we see are going to need it for some foreseeable future. We have to be able to articulate that time and how much money it's going to take to bring them up to the appropriate levels of safety, usability, and that sort of thing. Right.
Thank you.
Okay. If there are no other comments, let's move on to our next very good issue, which is local control funding formulas.
Thank you. So our chief business official, Susan Kinder, is out ill tonight, but we have plenty of folks who are very knowledgeable about that subject. And so basically, we're not talking so much about the actual funding formula itself, because you've had that update, but this is really leaning more toward the local control accountability plan that Trustee White was mentioning. So now I'll ask Mrs. Cindy Alba, our Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services, to present information regarding what we know as the LCAP already. And we will be seeking tonight, there's no action taken, but we will seek board requests for additional information and also some direction as to some next steps.
Good evening, President Dunlop, trustees, Superintendent Bowers. Tonight, as Superintendent Bowers said, Susan Kinder, our chief business official, is out this evening, and we were going to do this together, so I may not, you asked me specific questions about budget pieces, I may not fully be able to answer those. But we'll give you an overview of local control funding formula, which I think we've presented before, and so I'm thinking there won't be a lot of new information there. And also an overview of the local control accountability plans and the requirements that go along with that. So as part of the budget package, we know that there were changes that were made in the way school districts were funded, and that was local control funding formula. And that eliminated many of the state categorical funding restrictions. But the idea was to give local control, to allow people who are in the districts and in the communities to better be able to set the direction for the funds that are coming into the school districts. The LCFF also provided supplemental funds, noting that there were greater and more intense needs for certain specific student groups, and specifically English learners, foster youth, and students who qualify for free and reduced lunch meals. And those are often referred to as our low socioeconomic populations. The process with the local control funding formula was to increase transparency so that it was very open, which as a district for us, I think we've always been very transparent with our budget, but this just makes it even more so. The intent was also to improve equity across district and to improve local accountability. So looking at what's in and out with the new funding formula, as we said, that many of the categorical funds, this isn't all of the programs here, but many of the categorical funds are no longer specific categoricals that can only be spent in those areas. It has been those funds have been rolled into the local control funding formula. That is very difficult to say over and over again. I just want to say LCFF. And what is also out are the deficit factors, PERS, reductions, unemployment reimbursement. What's continuing with the new funding formula is that there will still be funding for special education, home to school, transportation, and for us that's primarily special education. The TIG grants, or Targeted Instructional Improvement Block Grant. For ROP, that's still in for 2 years. So it continues in the new funding formula for 2 years. Adult education is in for 2 years, but there is the legislation, the AB 86, which is looking at a different way to deliver adult education, and a new version for class size reduction as an add-on. The ACES program, which is our after-school program that we have at our at Junction and at Maryland School, and then child development and child nutrition. So with the local control funding formula, with the way the basic formula works, there's weighted funding levels depending on the grade spans. There's also, as we said, augmentations so that there is special attention, and so that we always keep in mind and set goals for our English learners, our low socioeconomic students, and foster youth, as those students have needs that we want to make sure that we meet. So there is augmented funding for those groups, and there's concentration funds for places, obviously, that have the high populations of English learners. And the other thing that's new is the local control accountability plan that goes along with the funding formula. Something else that was added to the local control funding formula is the economic recovery target. And this had to do with the districts that, because with the local control funding formula, we're not necessarily going to see an increase in funding, because mainly because they did not have a lot of those populations, the English learners and low socioeconomic groups, so that many of those districts that therefore would be eligible for an additional revenue add-on that's called the Economic Recovery Target, or ERT. And this is equal to the difference between the LCFF and the old revenue limit model, so that districts are not receiving less money. We are not a district who will be receiving the ERT. And as we kind of mentioned earlier in the slide about ROPs, that for 2 years those are to remain, and that we cannot redirect that funding, and that we need to continue to support ROP with the same level as we have, and home to school transportation, that for us again is our special ed transportation, and adult education needs to remain the same level of funding. So with the funding formula comes the transparency part and the part that is the accountability part. So the local control accountability plan is a vehicle for sharing performance data, showing how we're going to address certain needs, and attaching funds to a number of different areas where we're going to set goals so that we can continue to provide high quality educational opportunities for all students. That's sort of the general picture of the LCAP. A little bit of a timeline on the local control accountability plan. The State Board of Education, for right now, we have education code that tells us what are the pieces that are part of this local control accountability plan and the general provisions. The State Board of Education, before March 31st, will be adopting a template for our district to use in putting together this plan. At the November meeting that is happening this week or next week, tomorrow. So they've come up with some initial information. It's not exactly a template, but they're going to be making some initial decisions. We are all anxiously waiting for the template. Shouldn't say waiting for it, because there's much we can do while we're anticipating that template being released. But in January, we're hoping to see a version of the template, so we have an idea of how this is all going to work out. But by March, they need to adopt a template, and then we, as a district, will be using that template to develop our plan and put our plan into place to adopt before July 1st. But the State Board of Education, by October 1st, they need to adopt a rubric to assist in evaluating the LCAPs, to be able to look at the strengths, the weaknesses, and to help the county offices of education who will be submitting our plan to help them in identifying districts that need technical assistance. And then by July 31st and annually, there'll be revisions to the rubric of evaluation for use in the following fiscal year. So again, we need to, our timeline is to adopt a plan before July 1st, 2014. It is a 3-year plan, and it will be annually updated on or before July 1st. So the LCAP, what has been identified are 8 priority areas in the LCAP. And these areas cover all the different aspects of our school district functioning in order to provide a high quality education for our students. The other thing about these priority areas is we always need to keep in mind our special populations, our English learners, our low socioeconomic, and our foster youth. So one area is basic services. This is sometimes referred to as complying with the Williams settlement, but it has to do with making sure that teachers are properly assigned and credentialed in all subject areas. One of the pieces that was added later, and I've heard 2 different things, one that it'll be a 9th priority area, or it may be part of this one, is that we continue to have induction or a way to support new teachers to get their full credentials. But I have not seen that added actually into the priority areas yet. And then also part of basic services is standards aligned instructional materials, and that our facilities are in good repair. And I know Mrs. White kind of mentioned that a little bit earlier. The second priority area is school climate, and some of the specific areas that are mentioned in Ed Code are the suspensions rate and expulsion rates, and then there may be some other local measures that we want to add into that. And the state board may be adding to these also when they come out with their final guidelines.
If I could just interject,
Yeah.
one of the ways that's kind of exciting about this is all of these things are things we've already gathered data on, and we do it annually, but we've always done it sort of piecemeal. And I know I've had conversations with Trustee Rogie, White, and Runyon about the idea of a dashboard of baseline data that captures all the ways we would be measured. And so this isn't really, it's repackaged in a different way, and it's coming as a mandate from the state, and it'll be a really good measure of all of the performance so much of it right now has always been only API and AYP that we forget that there's so many other ways that we measure the success of a school district and of our students and our schools. And so this really will be that grand overview. But now that it's codified as part of our process, it won't be as piecemeal. So I think it's actually, even though it can sound like more work, but it's really just a different way of working with what the data is that we already have and making sure that our goals are constantly revisited and aligned and that there's an outcome that comes. So just kind of want to preface that as we delve in further to what these areas are.
Thank you for adding that, because that has been part of our conversation in terms of looking at, it's almost like a dashboard that we've talked about. Another area is pupil engagement, and the areas that they talk about are obviously attendance rate, dropout rates, and graduation rate. So looking at that data and setting goals in those areas, and again, on any of these, we can add our own measures. Parental involvement, our efforts to seek parent input and promote parent participation. Pupil achievement is another area that's a priority, and so statewide, they talk about statewide assessments, API, and then, of course, our students, because very much tied in with Common Core, preparing our students for college and career, so students that are prepared for UC and CSU, our English learners making progress toward English proficiency, which is also one of our Title III accountability areas, English learner reclassification, pupils who pass advanced placement exams, which has always been part of our annual assessment report, and then pupils who are prepared for college, as we look at, is measured by the early assessment program. Other priority areas are course access, and what this one talks about is the extent to which our students have access to what is defined in Ed Code is in terms of the courses that our students need to have at elementary, middle, and high school. But this one to me also ties very much into the equity work that we're doing at the high school level with the Google grant in course access for all of our students. Implementation of the Common Core standards, another area of focus within the LCAP priorities, so that it's implementing the Common Core standards and ensuring that they're accessible for all of our students, including English learners. And then we can also add other student outcomes, indicators of student performance, and there may be other exams we want to put into place, but we can look at other measures that they can be our local assessment, our local benchmarks, they can be any other kind of local measures of student outcomes that we want to put into place.
Such as physical fitness, now we're looking at PSAT for all sophomores, and it's just baseline data, but those types of things, so then we could measure and make improvements and see if things, so those are just some examples of formal tests, but there could be other measures that we think, count a lot, like our own writing assessment, that we do our district benchmark writing assessment, we do at every grade level, because if we rely solely on the state, then there'll only be cusp and transitional, so those types of things. There's a lot of things that could be added. We want to make sure they're meaningful and that there's something that we could easily pull up the data and then show that if we make changes, there's steady improvement.
So within the LCAP, there's what we'll be needing to do is to set annual goals for all students in each subgroup in each state priority area. So for our numerically significant ethnic subgroup, socioeconomically disadvantaged students, English learners, students with disabilities, and foster youth. What's very important within this plan is, comes up over and over again, is making sure that all of our students are achieving, that all of our students are being successful within our schools, and that we're truly measuring that along the way to ensure that that is happening and taking the steps. And so we set the goals, there are specific actions that will need to be in the plan to achieve the goals, and then expenditures budgeted to implement those specific actions. And then these actions would be for all students, and again, they're really looking at students who are English learners to make sure that they are reclassified as English fluent, and also that they're learning, they have access to the content standards, the Common Core standards. So transparency and involvement. Before the governing board considers adoption of the plan or an annual update of the plan needs to be presented to the parent advisory committees. and we'll talk a little bit more about those. But another piece of that transparency is also that members of the public need to be notified of the opportunity to submit written comments about the plan, and that we are required to ensure consistency between the LCAP and the school site plans, or the single plan for student achievement, and that we need to hold a public hearing at the same meeting as the public hearing held for the budget adoption. So many opportunities for input from our stakeholders. And then the governing board is also required to consult with teachers, principal, administrators, other school personnel, local bargaining units of the school district, parents and pupil in developing the plan. So we are required to consult with our bargaining units and making sure that everybody has the opportunity to provide input into the plan.
And I think, again, that's not really a shift, because we do that as a regular course. Whenever we take a big step in any direction, we include people. So it's not as if, even if it weren't required, it's not as if we weren't going to do that. We would be doing this because we're very inclusive. That's kind of the mantra the board has set up. We don't like to be doing things and then, impose them on any units. And we've already had some formal requests from some of the units to be included in the conversation. And so we, I don't know if we've responded yet formally, but that's definitely the open invitation.
Okay, so one of the requirements is to have a parent advisory committee, and it says that the Ed Code says that the board shall establish a parent advisory committee to provide advice to the governing board and superintendent regarding the requirements of this article, which is the article around the LCAP. And then that parent advisory committee needs to include parents of students who are English learners, who are eligible for free and reduced meals, and foster youth. On this one, there's not a requirement for a new committee if the district already has parent advisory committee that will meet this requirement. Another committee that we would need to have to provide input is the English Learner Parent Advisory Committee. And then if a district has, if a district enrollment includes 15% English learners, or at least 50 pupils who are English learners, which our district falls into that category, then we need to have an English Learner Parent Advisory Committee. And for this one also, a new committee is not required if the district already has a Parent Advisory Committee that meets this requirement. In our district, we do have a District English Language Learner Advisory Committee that I don't know if any of you have ever been to the meetings. Very, very high functioning and very active. Within our district too, we have other parent committees, and Superintendent Bowers, I said, we've always been very inclusive. And as she was saying that, I was thinking about sitting in some of these meetings as we share information. So some of the committees that we already have that are active and functioning within our district with some very strong parent leaders. Our District English Language Advisory Committee, or our DLAC. We have our District Advisory Committee, which is a committee that we're required to have that has Title I parents involved in. We have our Parent Advisory Committee, our PAC, which is migrant parents, which we have a very active group of migrant parents. Each school has a school site council who approves their single plan and are active in making sure that our school sites are keeping on the course. And then we have our Parent Communication and Information Council, which is our PCIC, which is Parent Club or PTA representatives that we meet with on a monthly basis. So we already have some committees established. I don't think any of these committees alone meet that requirement of the Parent Advisory Committee, although the DLAC may meet the requirements for the English Learner Advisory Committee. So how does this, one of the things you'll see throughout this is that piece about transparency. So prior to scheduling the public hearing on the LCAP, each district must present the LCAP for review and comment to the Parent Advisory Committees and the EL Parent Advisory Committee. And once the LCAP is presented, any questions or any kind of anything that the committee comes up with must be responded to in writing from the superintendent. So the committee needs to give feedback, and then the superintendent needs to provide written comments back. Each district must also notify the public of the opportunities to provide written comments on the specific actions and expenditures proposed, and those would also be responded to. The governing board, in adopting the LCAP, shall hold at least one public hearing to solicit recommendations and comments from the public regarding the LCAP, and that would follow all of our normal steps for holding a public hearing. And the public hearing is also held at the same meeting as a public hearing required for our district budget. At a different meeting, the governing board would adopt the LCAP and the LEA budget. So the LCAP, then once our board approves it, the LCAP is then submitted to the county, and the county needs to look at to decide if it meets all the requirements. So there's 3 basic areas. They need to see if we're following the template from the State Board of Education, if the budget, what's included in the budget, supports the plan. So are we providing sufficient funds to implement the actions and strategies that are in the plan? And then does the LCAP adhere to the expenditure requirements for funds apportioned for, when they talk about the unduplicated pupil count, they're talking about our English learners, our low socioeconomic or free and reduced lunch meal students, and our foster youth. So rather than going through this, I put in this little diagram, which kind of hard to see on the screen. But really what ends up happening then, once we submit our plan to the county office, they may ask for clarifications. There's timelines. They may ask for clarifications about parts of the plan. So by July 1st, we submit the plan. By August 15th, if they want clarification, they ask that from the district, and then we have 15 days to respond with clarification. And it kind of goes back and forth so that the county can then approve our plan, as long as it meets the requirement. So once the LCAPs are approved, then ours would be posted on our website, and then there would be links on the County Office of Education website to our LCAP, and the State Superintendent of Public Instruction will post those links also on the CDE website. So, in looking at next steps, proposed next steps for moving forward with development of the LCAP, one of the things we hear over and over again is that we know the template, the final template will come out in May, and we know that there's some steps we can be taking in the meantime to get ready. So for between fall and winter, proposed next steps are to hold a school board study session or study sessions to review the statutes of LCFF and LCAP to make sure that we have a firm understanding of what that requires, and then determine a process to establish the LEA-wide committees as needed. So we can make some decisions about, do we want to use any standing committees that are in place, for instance, our English Learner Committee, and then what process do we want to go through to develop the parent committee, and making sure that we have the representation that we need on that so that we meet the requirements. Another next step would be to start gathering and reviewing our most current data related to those 8 priority areas to establish a baseline. As Superintendent Bauer says, that's data that we look at regularly, but now maybe gathering it and putting it all together so that we can start preparing for that baseline, so we can start then setting our goals. We can start reviewing our data on current allocation of resources. How is it that we're using our funding right now? And we can start gathering that data and reviewing that. We can also start setting goals and strategies for subgroup improvement. We know that we're going to have to show some steps that we're going to take and some goals that we want to ensure that our English learners and some of our other subgroups are improving. And so setting those goals and looking at what those strategies will be for that improvement. We can also start the budget planning process for the next school year in relation to the LCAP priority. So it's a different way to look at the budget and looking at it in terms of those 8 areas and how our funding, how it is used right now and how we can use it in the future. One of the cautions that they have is that there may be other rules that are going to be coming as the state board refines this process. So we're cautioned not to lock ourselves into any budget for long-term commitments, but for right now, we can start looking at those priorities and how we use our funding. And then we can begin meeting with advisory committees. Once we determine how we want to establish those committees, we can begin meeting to establish purpose and understanding of LCFF and LCAP. And then as we move into spring, and when the template is released, we can review the final LCAP template, look at the guidelines, and start moving through that adoption process and finalizing our budget and moving forward. So as we kind of looked at, the requirements, these were some thoughts about next steps, and so we...
But we definitely would like to hear
Right.
what you think about this, because again, this was a brainstorm from cabinet level about here's what we think is required, here's something that might make sense, but we need you to weigh in and say, whether this makes sense to you, because the board has a different role in some instances, and most particularly with the establishment of this committee, that we definitely have one committee that might work. We don't have the other committee, and so the constitution and composition of that committee, we would like to have you weigh in on that.
Now, do we have questions on this?
I have a couple.
Mr. Ogie.
Actually, as you went through this, it sounds like it's just a different form of categorical spending. They're coming back and saying you have to do this, this, and this, and they're not done. And that kind of concerns me. What happens if our budget and our plan don't match?
Then they keep coming, there's a back and forth process, but then they also do have a new entity that's going to be called the California Coalition for Educational Excellence. That's more for if you're not making the progress, that entity will come and help us.
But I know the answer at the local level. If we turn it into the county, and if the county, what's nice about it is if they deny it for some reason, they can ask clarifying questions, and even if the parent advisory committee can ask clarifying questions in the community. And one of the requirements I keyed into, because it has my role in it, says the superintendent must respond in writing. So they can ask questions at the county. I have to respond in writing to any of their concerns. And if for some reason they don't approve it in its entirety, then they have to provide technical support in order to help get it right. So if they don't have to help us at all if they approve it, then we're on our own. But if they have some concern with it, then they must support us in fixing it. Mm-hmm. I wrote that down and I confirmed it.
Yeah.
Can we involve the county earlier on instead of sending it to them and having this back and forth issue?
Well, I think the county's involved automatically. And so, for instance, tomorrow, I'm meeting with all county soups, and we have normally it's a 2 to 3 hour meeting, and we have multiple agenda items. The only thing on is LCAP, and we're just basically trying to figure out what our role is. And then Damon will come in and meet with the CBOs about the portions of the funding. And so basically we're all kind of in the same boat, and everybody is going to make slightly different decisions. For instance, there's some districts we're finding that they don't even have DLACs or ELACs. Mm-hmm. So they have a further stretch to go in some cases. Others are doing it more piecemeal with focus type groups. And others are having cabinet members chair their committee. Some have a prominent community member. So there's a couple of different ideas. And so we're sharing where people are. We're all kind of in the same boat. And so we're going to be sharing those resources. And the county level is supposed to support us in the individual areas. Mm-hmm.
So I guess my next question would be, what's driving this, the budget or the plan?
It should be the goals and the plan, and then the budget should follow. But unfortunately, that only happens when you have sufficient resources to cover everything that you want to do. So I guess I would say budget follows it in the sense of it can also, but it can't get ahead of itself. It could constrain it. So it's very similar to of what we just went through with the Common Core Spending Plan that you'll be hopefully approving tonight. Is if we purely did on what we needed, it would be very different. But so instead we created the overview of what we actually need, and then we just took out the portion that we can actually fund. Because we still will not be getting sufficient money, but there is this hope that over an 8-year period, that will begin to happen.
Thank you.
Others' comments?
Yes. I've been to a couple of workshops on this and watched a webinar and all that. And it seems to me what we need to have is a timeline. And there are, of course, some things that can be done at the same time. I mean, we need to choose the committee. The board needs, it's a board committee, so the board needs to take action to establish the committee. And because it's a board committee, it's public, and the Brown Act noticed, and we don't do that very often, but we'll need to for this one. And if we can arrange to get the parents and the public to know that we're doing this, it'll be part of the transparency of the plan. But so we need to come up with some rules, establish a process to come up with the committee. There's a list of people we need to include. I don't know what you've heard about whether people can volunteer for the committee or whether board members appoint members of the committee or just how that works. But, that's part of what we need to do this fall. And at the same time, the staff can be gathering the information that you've talked about, the numbers we already have. On the other hand, some of those 8 items don't have numbers. There's parent involvement. What does that mean? 15 people at a site council meeting, and next year 17? I don't know what we're going to...
And that's interesting, because we've been talking about other measures of success, and parent involvement was one of them. And so we actually had a preliminary conversation with principals about it. This was last year, predating this, and when we were talking about the dashboard idea. And so they said parent involvement at elementary, at first it might be attendance at back to school night, which we do have, going to school conferences. And then in middle school, it might be checking school loop, or and then in high school, it might be attending an extracurricular and going to the expo. Okay. And so there are different levels of that. And so actually our folks, our administrators, kind of had fun with what that looks like. And often when they applied for distinguished school or something, they had to give measures. So they had more ideas than I could have even think of.
But we need to have something to put in the template.
We need to start.
So we need to start talking about that, and the parents need to talk about it. And one of the things, the word I've heard attached to this parent committee is empowerment, not just involvement, but empowerment. So as the plan evolves, and it's 8 sections, it needs to be generally available for feedback. We don't want to wait till the 1st of June and present the plan and as what we think is close to final, and find out that the public has substantial other things that they would like to include. And, so we have a parallel process when what staff can gather the data and propose the list that the principals proposed for that example, and then do the selection of the parent advisory committee. And as somebody said at one of these workshops, if you wait till that template comes out, you're going to be really far behind. So,
absolutely true.
So, that's another peg. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a real opportunity to engage our parents, engage our community, not just the parents, and actually think about our budget in relation to student achievement rather than just the bottom line. So I would like to see a timeline sooner rather than later with parallel things of what, Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because I'm looking at the Traumatola suggested timelines, and they did just that. They have some things that are happening on the financial research side, but some things are happening on the data gathering, and then some things that are happening on the community engagement or empowerment involvement side. And so it might be that these 2 things are going to be more cohesive than not. Mm-hmm. It could be, as we embark on this exciting new journey of focusing on kids and achievement with the promise and actual eventuality of resources to support it. And if they're not coming from the state, how do we, get them locally, I think we can actually probably do it simultaneously in that sense. Because some parents who get very passionate about this committee they also might be the great people to go out and be the volunteers for, and they'll definitely be the spokespeople for the bond. So,
and I think that board members need not serve on this board committee, though that would be up for a decision. Because in my experience, if we as board members keep track of the updates and the continual proposals and drafts of the plans, we have avenues to see that certain things are included on the agendas for consideration by the parent committee. I mean, it works very nicely to be at a committee meeting. I mean, you don't have to be there, but if you are there and you propose something, and if it doesn't fly, and you're a board member and you espouse it too strongly, it has more weight than maybe it ought to have. But as a board member, you can also send an email to whoever's in charge of the committee, and it can be discussed again by the committee, and maybe it'll fly. And of course, board members have one last chance when they do the final. But sometimes that doesn't work. I've tried that. That doesn't work.
Mr. McLaughlin, any comments?
I'm learning. Important thing here is that we're upfront with the parent. We let them know which way we're going to. And I think that if you can show improvement, there should be no problem. But you got to show improvement. But that's what they're looking for. And the stuff that's going on in Washington, D.C. is affecting our things that we do here this evening. Because finally, some people said, time to have these people, one nation, one group, good school system. And this is what they want. You've told them that schooling is important for your child to be able to get a job someplace else. Schooling has part of it, but being with it and working with it, it can be different. Thank you both for your information.
Thank you.
See, I read this, and I guess I don't have the right attitude. I see a lot of traps set in the language here. Like it says, what continues with new funding formulas, special education, with the same underfunding of special education that existed before, which means we will draw from the main pot to cover special education like we have. It talks about the augmentation for English language learners, and we always perk up and say, great, except I think we fall short of the percentage that puts us into the category to get extra funding for English language learners. Is that correct?
And we will be getting some funding for English learners.
We get the supplemental. We don't get the largest
Right.
amount, which is when you have the critical mass.
Right.
Right.
And
But
so
so
we
we
fall
get-
short of that.
Right.
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 We get some extra.
And then they have this wonderful thing about the economic recovery target, which was meant to protect the schools that got a lot more money than we did in the past. And so, we're relying on this thing to be long-term, and every year that it continues on without having solved the problem, I worry that it will get whittled away at, and we won't see the money. So I'm not particularly excited that this is going to solve our budget problems. We have to do our budget problems. What they've given us is a lot of other mandates that we have to work out and figure out how to control and make sure, because we're not going to generate any more money than they give us. So we're going to have to figure out how we live within the budget, and we basically do what we can to satisfy them that we're following the rules they've set. But I don't see anything here that really excited me about it's just going to make the whole world of difference to us. So unfortunately, maybe I just don't see it. But that's my concern, is that we're going to have the same money we had last year plus a little bit, and maybe the next year we'll have a little bit more, but we have to work within that budget. It's not like there's any wonderful, huge amount of new money they're throwing at us. And yet we have a lot of different ways they're trying to manipulate, control, whatever, how we do that. So I think we have to be very careful that we don't step into some trap which derails what we've kind of got going. So that's unfortunately my worry here. So anyway, other comments from public or anyone else who would like to tackle that?
The funding still comes via Prop 98, so there's no difference in funding.
Right.
And the legislature still votes to be generous or not.
They'll vote on it every year, and so we'll have to worry about that. So anyway, I think we'll have to see what happens, but I think it's going to be a challenge to figure out how we change the way we think to live within the mandates they've been given us and the budgets that are going to be realistically here. If there are no other comments, let's move on to maybe a happier subject, which is adoption of core values for facilities.
So thank you, Mr. President. We'll ask Mr. Chris Van Schack to lead this action item. And we had a very fun, I think, and involved or engaged or empowering would be a good word, first session for facilities planning and core values. And I know we're going to share this with Larry Trematola and his team, as well as make it widespread. And then we've had initially very few comments in the revisions, and then many things flooded in. So we've come up with something that we think captures what everybody has thought of.
Thank you, Mrs. Bowers. I don't know if I would call it fun, but it'll be an interesting conversation about, I think, a topic that's really important. And again, it relates directly to the conversation we had earlier with Trematola around facilities. And so what we have done is we got together as a group of folks, and we began talking about facilities. And we had a study session back in late September, and we created a framework. And the concept of core values is to help kind of guide conversations. And again, as many school facilities as we have, as much use as they get, we've got lots of different ideas on what we should do with those both now and in the future. So we got together as a group, as a board committee or board group, and we started to create a framework to go forward with the development of some facility planning. So again, the intent here is to guide conversation. And so we created sort of a preamble, which is similar to a mission statement. And again, that's mostly around having efficient conversations and planning meetings. And so it's not so much people voicing opinions on what they want for their own child, their own school. It really is about having efficient conversations that are related to values that we've created as a community and as a board. And probably more importantly is to be transparent about that. So we're not making decisions behind closed doors. We are speaking with our community and our stakeholders about the direction that we're going as a district in terms of facilities. So based upon the conversations that we had and based upon information that we gathered, I sat down and with the task of trying to put those into some lucid points. And so what we came up with is core values, and these are, we will go through these sort of individually. There's 5 of them in total. And I think the most important is that there's some key words in each of these. And in the first one, the conversation was about having safe and well-maintained and comfortable environments for our students to learn, and environments that would support instructional activities. And that sounds like sort of of course, why wouldn't you want that? But I think a lot of people have conversations about facilities that aren't focused on creating good learning environments. Sometimes they're overly focused on aesthetics, and sometimes not focused enough. And so I think our first core value had to do with, again, in meeting our own district mission statement of ensuring that students are prepared to contribute and thrive in a changing economy, we create learning environments that are focused on providing those opportunities. Secondly, we've talked about diverse approaches to teaching and learning. I think schools were built over the last 100 years in a very similar manner. You've got basically a box with lots of seats in it. And the teacher stands at the front and provides information, and students sometimes gather in small groups, but often the facilities aren't created to encourage that. And so we'd like school facilities that are flexible. Breakout sessions, larger group sessions, small group projects, large group projects, and how can we create facilities that allow teachers to move furniture around and change the direction that they go each day sort of at a moment's notice. And again, if you think back to sort of the 6 rows of 5 seats that has been sort of the staple of American education over the last 100 years, we want to get out of that and get into a more flexible environment. So core value number 2 is, again, to recognize that there are diverse approaches to teaching and learning, create spaces that are flexible, and secondarily, recognizing that our community uses our facilities during off hours, and recognizing that that's an important, it's an important tool for them. And many groups come and use our classrooms, many groups come and use our gyms, and we don't want to discourage that. We want our facilities to be available for community use. And again, the words there for routine as well as extraordinary circumstances. And so we can hold large events at our high schools, for example, or you know, theater productions, things like that. The third core value has to do with providing campuses that aren't the same, but that are of the same value. And this board has been real clear, and I think the community has been real clear, that you shouldn't know the socioeconomic economic standing of a community by the way the school looks. That when you walk into any school in our district, you feel like this is a great place. This is a place that's well equipped, and it doesn't have to do whether it's in the rich area of town or the not so rich area of town. That our school facilities, when you walk up those steps, they all feel great. And it shouldn't be some facilities that are better maintained or better equipped than others. And so I think we talked about equity, we talked about a source of pride. And again, I think it gets back to a little bit to aesthetics, that we want our students to feel as though when they walk up the steps to their school each day, they're in a good place. And that has to do with the work of the maintenance department, but also has to do with the work of gathering the resources to improve our facilities in that regard. I think our fourth core value, as we talked about, providing teachers with the tools that they need to provide 21st century instruction. And I think this speaks in general to technology, but probably even broader than that. And again, I talked earlier about flexible learning spaces, but we want to make sure that the tools that are necessary to help our students be successful in a very different age than we grew up in and we were educated in, that our teachers have those facilities, and whether it's document cameras, projection units, again, furniture that's flexible and movable and things like that, we want to make sure that our teachers aren't lacking in equipment. And so we talk a little bit in core value number 4 about making sure that that those things are delivered. And the fifth one is more related to the way we go about creating our facilities. And again, it has to do with transparency. It has to do with doing things the right way and bidding projects properly, making sure that all of our actions are in compliance with the law, and not just the law, but doing what's right. You know, following strong sets of ethics is in addition to following the letter of the law. So core value number 5 is specifically geared toward making sure that our communications with the public is effective and broad enough, and that the process we go through in determining which projects are funded and which sequence they're funded in is all done above board. And you know, nothing done in the middle of the night. It's all sort of done in a very public and honest way. So again, my goal here was to gather information that the board, you know, we meandered around and we hit some really key points, I think, and we brainstormed and we came back, and the goal here was to create some values that when we go forward and we talk about projects and we talk about, again, the possibility of a bond and how we'll be good stewards of public funds, these are the areas that we're going to go back to and say, does it fit into our core values? Is this what we want to be? These core values say who we are as a district, and are the projects and the direction that we go in terms of facilities representative of that direction. So that was the attempt here, again, is to sort of capture the thoughts of the board, and again, board members are capturing the thoughts of the community as public officials. So that's where we kind of stand, and again, any feedback you'd have would be appreciated.
Board member comments?
You're our wordsmith. No, I did have a comment. When I suggested extraordinary circumstances, I not only meant the very special things that might happen at our campuses on purpose, but also that our campuses are shelters of last resort.
Right.
I mean, they're enclosed facilities for sheltering people in emergencies. And my only wordsmithing comment would be that, you know, I think this should be straightforward word. And if in the sentence of number 3, if we said that our facilities reflect or are determined by student needs and are determined and reflect student needs rather than reflective of, some clever way to not say reflective of. I mean, they reflect.
Okay. Other comments? Mr. Rogue, you have any comments?
No, but I will move that we adopt the core value as stated and changed.
Okay, do you have comments? Okay, I saw a few comments. So hold on for a second and then we'll vote on this. But I think it looks really quite good. And as you were going through it, I made a couple of things. And I'm comfortable with what it says, but I think sometimes we may want to make a PowerPoint that there's very few words on it. And I had the issue of we want equity of facilities. That doesn't mean they're all the same, but it means that if schools really should have something, they do have it. And again, the emphasis on pride in our facilities, so that the pride is both community and, from our point of view, that the facilities, you know, look like they're going to do what they can. And then supporting technology and teaching is the other key word. But I'm happy with this wording. And I was thinking of when equity of facilities, I think of the problems, in my view, of the gym. I think, you know, any building that's been there longer than when Chuck went to school, we ought to at least take a careful look at. So
in that case, they're all pretty new then.
Stonehenge, for example.
There's the gym at Livermore High has always worried me because, you know, it was old when I got here, and so that's a problem. And also, then you have Granada with no really suitable auditorium. And it doesn't have to be the same as Livermore, but I don't think they have a suitable.
For a theater, you mean?
Yeah.
A theater?
Yeah. A place where you can have, you know, 300 students meet instead of, you know, 55 or something, which they have used for a long time. So I think there are some inequities that we really ought to look at and figure out if there are ways we can adjust those in terms of looking what we need to do in facilities. But I think we ought to go through all the schools and say, okay, what is it that's either missing, is not up to par, and make that list, because that's what we really need to, at some point, review for the various locations. But anyway, we've had a motion a second, but if you have a comment, please.
I just had one question. So you did mention the word technology. So the word technology doesn't actually appear. We said 21st century instruction and we said tools.
Right.
So I just wanted to find out if that's sufficient, or did you need?
No, that's
Okay.
just fine.
And then the other email that had come to me earlier today was that someone had asked, did we ever mention energy efficient? And I said we had efficiently completed, and I think we were talking about construction happening in a timely manner. And so there wasn't anything specific about energy efficiency or conservative. And so I just don't know if that's something that was intentional or something that was overlooked, or is it not something we wanted to include? Because my sense is that people are going to come up with, they're going to say, well, we want to do you know, they may say we want to look at these things, and will that fit in, or does it need to be said?
I think the statements are general enough that we can include any future developments. We don't know what's going to happen next year, that we can't allow in this document for everything that we can possibly put out there. I mean, the details are not needed here. I mean, we're general enough that we can adapt for anything that comes up forward.
Okay, so the suggestion was in number 1, we will provide facilities that are safe, well-maintained, comfortable, energy efficient, or something. So it's just to put it in there only because what has come up from the community was that and even from our workshop, it was on our notes, was safety, the stimulation and making sense for, and then also being legal. And so and then also the idea of being energy efficient. It's kind of, it's something that really this community cares
Some
about.
people would think energy efficiency for its own sake.
So I just wanted to I don't want to steer you away from it. I just want to say it kind of got left out somehow in the changes.
I don't view energy efficiency just for its own sake. We save money by being energy efficient, and that really gets basically back into the same thing of making sure that we are providing the instructional activities for the students. And so I'm okay with that, remaining general with the idea that, we could make this list very long, and we could keep Chris a full-time job working on it. But if we're all reasonably comfortable with the way it is now, I think we could go with it, and then if someone really feels like we need to do
add to it
an amendment next year, we can look at that or something. So
Causes a problem.
yeah. So is everyone? We have a motion and a second. Any other comments? Comments from the public? And this is just a regular action item. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? There's none opposed. Okay. Let's move on to the next item, which is approval of single school plans.
So thank you, Mr. President. We've all been heavily involved in this single plan process and presentation process, and so this is the final approval. We'll ask Mrs. Cindy Alba, our Assistant Superintendent, to do the honors of the overview and introduction.
Okay, thank you very much. So our single plans for student achievement, Part B, tonight I'll be presenting those for your approval. So I thank all of you for this opportunity. As Superintendent Bauer says, we have had the opportunity, all of you have had the opportunity to already get previews of our single plans for student achievement, Part B. But as a means of reviewing, the single plan for student achievement is required of all schools that receive state and federal categorical dollars. And even though a lot of those have been flexed, and even with the new local control funding formula, there still are state and federal categorical funds going to the site. So we've continued with our single plans. Our plans are a way for the school sites to put together a blueprint for improving academic performance that they develop with their school community. And in our district, we choose to have a two-part submission. We do Part A in the spring, and then right now we do Part B after we get our state assessment data so that we can set our goals and look at that data in terms of determining next steps. The single plan for student achievement looks at all the different services that are at the site. We look at our data, our API, academic performance index, our AYP, our state testing. And even as I'm saying all this, I realize that next year some of this is going to look a little bit different as our state testing and our state measures look a little bit different.
You're making an assumption that we'll get away with not doing that.
This is true. This is true. So what we look at in our plan is we look at our data, we look at what are the causes of our successes and our challenges, and then we look at what we need to implement that are research-based strategies in order to continue to improve and enhance student performance. We set annual goals for our API, which is our state measurement of improving in the schools, our annual yearly progress, which is the federal measure. And then within our district, we've set some district goals in mathematics, some different focus areas, writing, reading comprehension, and then continuing to focus on our English learners so that we can see that growth. Another area that you'll see incorporated within the plan and that you heard in the presentations is integrating the Common Core as we begin to implement those standards. Some other district-wide practices that you will see and heard about in all the plans over the last few years, our work as professional learning communities and collaborations are working together, looking at student work and using the 4 guiding question to help us move forward, using data to be able to look at programs that are working, programs that we need to tweak, or in some cases, decide to go in a different direction. But we also use our data to help look at which students we need to provide extra support and which students we can provide enrichment opportunities. common formative assessments, benchmark assessments. Those are all continuing to be part of practices in the district, which we see in our single plans. Our instructional rounds, which is our way of looking in the classrooms and looking at instructional practices that are making a difference for students, and having teachers have the opportunity to see those and to be able to replicate those in their classrooms. So we continue to have our instructional rounds in place, and as I mentioned, our implementation of our Common Core state standards. So you did see at the peer reviews where the principals shared their plans. They shared their highlights of the plans with their peers, with district representatives, some cabinet members, where we asked questions. We got to share and hear about some of the successes, and it was really an activity where principals really appreciate the sharing with each other and hearing what's happening at other schools and being able to duplicate some of those ideas at their own school. So they did share their plans. And so tonight, we're asking the board to approve the single plans for student achievement Part B for 2013-14. Each of you got copies of the plans for your designated schools, and all the plans, drafts of them are all posted on the website at this time. So we are asking for your approval. The school site councils have approved those plans at the school site.
Thank you. And so board members, any comments? Mr. Rogie, please.
I just have a question in general. Since we're not doing the API testing for next year, will this data just be repeated in the following year's site plan?
Actually, what we have there, some of that hasn't been totally decided yet. Okay. But on the API, we will either keep our same API, we'll either do an average. They may be doing something different with the high school API. So a lot of that is still under discussion between the State Department of Education and the state school board.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? No? Okay, thank you very much. Do we have a motion on this?
Mr. President, I move that we adopt the single school plans for student achievement Part B 2013-14.
I'll second.
We have 2 seconds.
Second.
So
2 seconds.
Tom McLaughlin, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Alba. That you have your approval. Now I guess you're up again. Okay.
So, Mrs. Alba, I guess we'll move on to the proposal of the Common Core State Standards District Spending Plan.
Okay. Thank you, President Dunlop, trustees, Superintendent Bowers. So tonight, my next item is the approval of the California Common Core State Standards District Spending Plan. This plan, a draft plan, was presented at the previous meeting for input that we integrated in feedback from you, which then we provided more information and so forth. And so at this meeting, we're asking for approval. Just by means of background, and some of this we went over at the last meeting, is that with the adoption of the Common Core State Standards, the state really recognized that the adoption of the standards necessitated new learning strategies. And their strategies are closely aligned with 21st century learning for students to be able to be problem solvers, communicators, and to have stronger reasoning skills. So the state budget, within the state budget, they're designated $1.2 billion to support the implementation of the Common Core. Each district is receiving approximately $200 per student to be expended during the 2013-14 and 14-15 fiscal years, hence the pile of dollar bills in the corner. And so the allowable expenses for this funding are 3 different areas. They're professional development aligned to the Common Core standards, instructional materials aligned to the Common Core standards, and then technology necessary to integrate the Common Core state standards for the purpose of improving student performance. And they specifically say in there that you can use the funding, recognizing that the computer-based assessments are going to necessitate technology, hardware in the students' hands, and also the infrastructure in order to teach in a different way, but also for our students to be able to take the online assessments. So for our district, we are receiving $2,525,800 that is designated for Common Core spending. At the October 15th board meeting, we presented this to the board for explanation and discussion. And now today, and then we presented you some information, and I have some additional information in the slides. Today I'm asking for approval of the plan, and then on or before July 1st, 2015, we'll have to submit a detailed expenditure report to the California Department of Education showing how we spent these funds aligned with our spending plan. We identified our immediate priorities in our district. Our number one priority was technology, the second was professional development, and the third one was instructional materials in order to implement the Common Core standards. One of the things we looked at was what are our full and long-term anticipated costs. At our last meeting, what we discussed was the fact that although this is wonderful to have this money for the Common Core, to be able to take some steps forward, it does not come close to covering the total cost of implementing the Common Core standards. So we put together some numbers that were in a way of showing what that cost really is in terms of technology. If we were really going to put the individual learning devices in each student's hands and have the infrastructure to support that, where that in itself would be over $7 million. To have professional development, 3 additional professional development days is ideally what we'd like to have in order to be able to provide more support for our teachers, to have coaches, to have workshops and trainings. That actual cost is, over $2 million. And then instructional materials, which is always interesting. One adoption for our district of either math, language arts, any of the adoptions are generally between $800,000 and $1 million for one content area adoption. So those were a way of looking at the full and long-term anticipated costs. And then we looked at what it is that how we thought we could use the money in our proposed plan of using $1.8 million for technology in order to be able to purchase Chromebooks for the number we're using is about 40% of the students who are being tested on the Smarter Balanced Assessment, and then to be able to do the infrastructure upgrades and the management to support that. Some professional development, $500,000 for that, and then $225,000 for some core and supplementary instructional materials. And the core materials we'd be looking at would be probably the grade 8 math materials, since the grade 8 standards were different. I know this one's kind of funky to look at, but this is attached to the agenda item. This is the actual Common Core State Standards District Spending Plan showing that $500,000 would be for professional development, and that's approximately 20% of the budget, $225,000 and that should actually say $225,800, which is 9% of the budget for instructional materials and 1.8% for technology, which is 71%. So what we're asking tonight is for approval of the California Common Core State Standards District Spending Plan.
Okay, board member discussion, any comments? No comments. Do we have a motion on this?
I do have a comment. In the last meeting, I asked for a projection of what it's going to take to keep technology funded based on what we're receiving. In 3 years, a lot of this equipment will go obsolete or get lost or damaged. So I was looking at, in 3 years, what is it going to cost us to replace, upgrade? Because this is only one-time fund. So what's our buy-in to keep this, what we're going to get in the funding going in 3 years or 5 years or 7 years? We're not expecting any further technology funds, are we?
So actually, there's a couple of we're not expecting precisely money like that, but certainly with local control funding formula, what will happen is, since there is flexibility and it's local control, this information will be shared as we look at other resources and priorities for that. And Yeah, and so and if we go for a bond, then technology infrastructure cost would be coming from that, and then that would free up other funds. And we've also, there's just something that we just came out today, I guess, that there is also there's a new Prop 39 feature of a technology bond, which is just for that. It's a shorter term. It's kind of like what Trustee Runyon was talking about in our workshop. It's a short-term bond that's just for one very focused area. And we didn't talk about that tonight because we didn't have a chance to vet it with the Tramatol advisors. And that might be too much for people to handle. But certainly if we were to go out and the larger bonds weren't surveying and polling well, then we might just go for something like that. So we have to keep that on the radar. That was a perfect question, which is why that larger number this doesn't even begin to cover it. You also had a suggestion about would vendors work with us on making accessible for parents so that parents could purchase, and we can't do a bulk price with them and then be responsible for the purchase. But the vendors that we have been talking to, Mr. Warner has already talked with them, and they are getting prices down. If a parent is connected with us and they want to purchase a Chromebook that would match so that the kids would use the same thing at home and school, they're getting the price down to, I think it's a $260 or something like that. So it's a pretty good deal. So he's worked hard on that. So we thank you for that suggestion.
Other questions? No? We have a motion on this?
I move that we approve the proposed Common Core State Standards District spending plan.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And no opposed.
And next, I see Mr. Benoit inching closer and closer. So it sounds like it's his turn, and what he'll be doing is bringing for your approval certain policies from Series 5000 and 9000. Because Mrs. Alba has had enough items for the evening, I think.
Good evening, Dr. Dunlop, Superintendent Bowers, members of the board. Tonight, as Superintendent Bowers had stated, I bring to you two policies for second reading from Series 5000 and 9000. The timeline that we had followed, first reading posting on October 7th, first reading October 15th, second posting October 18th, and tonight, second and final reading. Just to remind you, the two policies, one 5030 student wellness. It is a replacement of an existing board policy and administrative regulations. It's being updated for consistency with CSBA publications, monitoring for success, and student wellness. So the policy revises section on goals and nutrition, physical activity, and other wellness activities, and adds language related to school gardens, summer programs, as opportunities for nutrition, education, and physical activity, professional development, school health services, and bullying prevention, and also adds notes from our nutritional guidelines for foods available at schools, on nutrition standards for school lunch and breakfast programs, as well as access to drinking water during mealtime. The second policy that I bring to you tonight is from Board Bylaw 9220, Board of Education Elections, and this is being updated to reflect a new law, AB 2410, which provides that a person is ineligible to hold public office if he or she has been convicted of a felony involving the following. As we said, it provides a person is ineligible to hold office if he or she has been convicted of a felony involving bribery, offering a bribe, embezzlement, theft of public funds, extortion, perjury, or conspiracy to commit any of these crimes. And the bylaws also reflect the California Voting Rights Act, which prohibits the use of at-large voting method when its use prevents members of a protected class, voters of a minority race, color, or language group from being elected to the board. The superintendent Superintendent's recommendation is to approve the second and final reading, proposed replacement policy and AR from 5,000 and the revised board bylaw from series 9,000. Do you have any questions or comments at this time?
Board members?
I would just would like to make a comment that at the policy committee, when this came up, a couple of the principals pointed out that recess is part of the daily activity that our students are expected to get, and that this was inconsistent with some of the discipline practices of some teachers at some schools, which includes foregoing recess and sitting on the bench, which is not an activity. So the principals sounded like they would work hard with their principal teachers to not have sitting on the bench be a regular long-term solution to classroom problems.
That is true. We'll continue to look for alternatives to that form of discipline.
It must have been the week I was gone when you started on these. So when I read them, I ended up with a whole bunch of little marks, some of which were more entertaining than anything else. But I'll give this to you, and you can do what you want with them.
Okay.
But there was one in here. It said, this prohibits bullying and harassment of all students, include bullying on the basis of weight or health. And I think if you just say any student, period, the other doesn't matter, you know. And so there are lots of little items like that. And I'll just give this, and you can go through that, and you might enjoy some of the comments. They're kind of funny. I was wondering how many of our schools have school gardens at this point.
I know of probably 4 at least.
Okay, so
I think it's probably
just off the top of my head.
There's probably at least 6, maybe even more.
But you have to count Livermore maybe multiple times because that's probably a bigger garden, right?
Oh, there you go. So
but anyway, do we have a motion on the changes to the board bylaws and policies, I guess?
I move that we approve board policies and administrative regulations and board bylaws from the series 5,000 and 9,000 as presented.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Consent items. We're on to the consent items. Let's see, is that right? Okay.
Mr. President, I would like to make comments on 2 of them.
Yes, please.
I do have a question on purchase order summary. I'd asked this of Susan Kender, but she's obviously not here, so I didn't get my answer. It's just a one that I had not seen before, and that's teacher's commission. I didn't know what that meant. Anybody know?
The Commission on Teaching Credentialing?
It says teacher commission and it's $70. I didn't know what it was regarding to.
It's probably the Commission on Teacher Credentialing.
Okay.
But that's what I'm thinking off the top of my head.
It's not an issue. I just didn't know what it meant.
Oh, because commission could also sound as if they're making money off of something. I
That's
can
kinda why I thought
tell
you
you pretty much it's not that, unfortunately.
$70 commission. I want to know what they're selling here. And then the other one is approval of gifts to the district. I do want to thank everybody that has given generously to the district. I'm sure that the board would also say the same thing. We do appreciate it. It's much needed, and please don't stop. Other than that, I would move that we.
Did you add up the amount that was
I was going to do that, but I didn't do it.
It was a lot, so. Yeah.
But I do. I would like to make a motion to approve the consent of number 11, A through K.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion. We have a second for that? Okay, we have a second. All those in favor of approving the consent calendar of motions?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, good. Let's move on then to consent items motions, which is, oh, let's see. No, that's, got to fix that. consent items resolutions. Okay, so we have resolutions A, B, and C.
I move that we adopt resolution 13, 14, 15 of the year 13, 14. Huh. Gosh, what's that?
Did we get all of those right? There was a lot of 13s and 14s, but anyway, okay.
I'll second.
Okay, and we have a motion and a second on that, and for this one, we'll have a roll call vote.
Mr. Rogie.
Aye.
Dr. Dunlop.
Aye.
Mr. McLaughlin. Mrs. White, aye.
Okay. And we'll move on to our board member reports and requests. So, Mrs. White, oh, Mr. McLaughlin, if you go ahead first. He was, if that was the one who was sitting back there, he actually left.
Sometimes we have visiting students, they come for a civics class and they have a certain time frame. Usually they stay till 9 or the 2 hours of the meeting. So I think he stays and then he brings back feedback or writes in a journal and gets credit for civics. That's what I believe.
Yeah, but they should do that when we have the comments from the public or any of the other items where we ask for public comment. But a lot of them come really for their civics class and they're taking notes and then they go back and provide a report.
And they also write us letters. So we've been getting letters. I've been getting letters. Sometimes the board gets them. Sometimes Dr. Dunlop answers them. I know that I had one was about dress code and uniforms. And there was another one that came in recently. So after they come to this meeting, if something strikes their interest, then they go back to civics, and that's how they're expected to write a letter to a public official or to a staff member. So we'll hear probably from that young man, and I'll share the letter.
No.
I don't think they can hear you. You got to get it closer to the microphone.
Mr. McLaughlin wants to know if the student had anything to say because he was speaking to some of you in the audience. Mr. Benoit knows.
He was just curious of the process and how the board meeting worked and how long that I thought it would continue.
I'd like to know what you told him.
It depends who has the mic, right? Is that?
We did vote on this? Yeah, we voted on it. We voted on the resolution.
We did.
I was just trying to figure out where we were in the agenda.
We voted on the resolution. So it's board member reports. So,
okay.
Mr. McLaughlin, do you have any board member report that you want to present? Okay.
No more.
Okay. Mrs. White.
I was delighted to be able to go to the award ceremony yesterday afternoon when the Lawrence Livermore National Security presented checks to Granada Christensen and 2 checks to East Avenue Middle School for some of their science project. You know, I like to go to support the students and the teachers and their staff, but also to let the public know that we support the students and the teachers.
Mr. Rogan?
Well, I was going to say the same thing.
He was there too.
So it was quite an honor meeting the new director of the lab, and it was better for us to get the money for science, and I like that too. So that's it.
Okay. On, I can't remember, the end of last week, I was invited to a meeting where they're starting to talk about a youth center in town, which will be aimed at arts and science and technology. And so they're trying to, I think that was an initial meeting just to open the discussion. And I found out about it the day before, and they told me I could come, so I listened in. And there was quite a number of people from the community representing different factions of people that do arts, people who are interested in helping students and so on. And it's going to take a bit of effort to get everyone, I think, into, I think, a reasonable understanding that everyone can't get everything. So it's going to have to be worked out about how this is done. But it's a very interesting prospect that there could be a youth center which was aimed really at arts and science in town, and I think that would be helpful, and we want to pay attention to that and see if we can keep it directed in the direction of students. And with that,
okay, thank you. So,
please.
So in answer or in response to that, I also clipped those articles. I saw them in the newspaper about this possibility of a science, technology, and STEM arts program or museum or facility. And so we did talk about that in cabinet today. We definitely would want to weigh in, and then I thought we could bring it up at intergovernmental also to find out what was kind of the overview. And maybe that's what they're thinking about if they wanted to do a joint use or something with the bond, something that would actually stimulate that. I'm not sure. So we will find out. So we haven't met for a few weeks, so we have quite a few things to share and highlights. So I'll just cover a few. Our district participated on 10/18 at 10/18 in the Great California Shakeout. That's an earthquake drill. And we were trained and prepared for emergency response. We do take safety very seriously. And what we have learned that when we practice and practice, then when things actually happen, we're prepared. And so everything went very well. We have a couple items that we're going to follow up on, but overall, everybody responded as expected. We all had the chance. I want to thank the board publicly for the many hours. I don't know if people realize the hours and hours of time that you spend in reviewing the single plans and in attending these personal presentations. So it's many hours that blocked out that Mrs. Alba did a great job of working with the principals, especially we have some new principals, and working through the template and making sure that everything was met legally and also that they were excited about what they were sharing. And there's a lot of feedback, but I did want to thank all of you for committing to that and being there. I know our principals appreciated it. Trustee White and I attended a joint Alameda County School Board Association and Contra Costa County School Board Association presentation, and that's where we learned a lot about local control funding formula. And I believe that they're also going to have a website and eventually a sample, some kind of a sample of what some of our study sessions might look like and some policies for Mr. Vernoy to work with on LCAP and all of that. We ended up, I had an opportunity, I got to visit Christensen Middle School for two really exciting things. I was the guest speaker. They invited me to speak about leadership, on service leadership and the importance of student voice and activities that are inclusive for all students. So that was a lot of fun. I also had the opportunity to come in at the request of one of the custodians at Christensen because he wanted to honor the cleanest classroom that he saw. And so we surprised the class. And the custodians came in and served ice cream. I brought cupcakes that I did not make, and they were nutritionally okay. Barbara Lee approved them. And then the students, the best part was after they ate the cupcakes and ice cream, they cleaned up after themselves. So it was very nice. Trustee White and I attended the opening night of Parent Project, and that's a partnership program that we have had for many years with Access. It's designed to give parents tools and resources and also provide a network of support if they're struggling with students who are, what did they call it, strong-willed and challenging. So I attended the Livermore High School homecoming skits they mentioned earlier. I was one of the judges. I probably will never be a judge again. It is so difficult. They were all spirited. The floats were incredible. I'm hoping we can secure one of the floats for our rodeo parade because then we would be in Disneyland, which would be very fun. Also, my husband and I attended the Livermore High homecoming game, and it really was neat to see the tribute to the homecoming queen and her court. Mrs. Kinder and I don't know if I should spill the beans on this, but I think people know now. We were undercover bosses at Granada High School. We went into the campus catering as substitutes in their kitchen. We worked the whole pre and post and during lunch. The kitchen was immaculate. The staff was really helpful. The students, I think that was really exciting to see. I didn't know if the students, how they would be with a sub person, and they had no idea who we were. And they were polite, thankful, appreciative, and even patient because I was new with the cash register. They also, I was amazed at what a science they have it down to. In the campus catering department, and we served hundreds and hundreds of lunches in a very short time at all of these different stations. So and what was amazing was only one student who didn't get their first choice, and we only had 3 items left over from all of that. So it was pretty amazing. And a lot of prep for a very short period of time. But I also know that my days of food service have been few and far between. I used to work in my parents' restaurants, and I decided I should not quit my day job. They do it better. Then also, my husband and I had a chance to go to the Autumn Treasures Smith School. We had a 50s theme, and Mrs. Kinder and Mr. Warner joined us. And they raised so much money for the students and the teachers and the schools, and also everybody had a great time. And we did talk about going to the Lawrence Livermore award ceremony. So we received a total of $20,000. So that's pretty amazing. And it was for the 4 programs at Christensen East and Granada. But also what was exciting about meeting our new director is that he is the son of former Livermore School District Principal and District Office Administrator Doris Knapp. So some of you may remember. And he is a graduate of Jackson, East, and Livermore High. So I was talking with Nadine Horner, and she wants either the student body, maybe the newspaper at the school, or at least on our website to feature an outstanding alumnus who kind of came back home to take on one of the most high-profile leadership positions, even if it's interim. At least it may turn out to be permanent, but either way, we're very proud and excited that he came from our schools, and now he's in that important position. With that, I will close my report.
Good, and we're adjourned at 9:44.